You're listening to 15 Minutes of Flame with Robert Phoenix.
Well, good morning. That was good morning music. Good morning porn music for your mind. New opener there. What's happening, everybody? This is Robert Phoenix broadcasting to you live from Fredericksburg, Texas, where it is a mild 61 degrees out this morning. The schizophrenic weather that is hitting the planet, which nobody is really talking about, certainly is making its mark here in South Central Texas. I was talking with a client yesterday, and they were about 7,000 feet in the air in Utah, and they were having a snow blizzard. And where are we? May 1st? Really? A snow blizzard? You know, who knows what's going on with the geoengineering? Like, are they at a point now where the geoengineering has just completely taken over and everything is just toast? And that the weather is out of control? Are they pushing it to be out of control? This is very unusual. This is a very, very unusual weather experience. I'm just telling you right now. I think that's the big story, to be honest with you. And something significant is happening with the planet. Some people are talking pole shift, possibly. Some people are talking Nibiru. Some people are talking about that there's something significant happening with the sun, that they're trying to keep from our eyes. Some people are talking about global dimming, that we're actually headed into a period not unlike the Dark Ages in Europe, and that's a really interesting period because it's basically right after the fall of Rome. Once the Visigoths essentially took Rome over from within and without, and Rome fell. Consequently, there was also a time of darkness. We're talking meteorological darkness over Western Europe. I hope the audio is okay today. I apologize for yesterday's intermittent audio bursts. I think it might have to do with the connection here. By tomorrow, we'll be in the new studio, and everything will be up and running, and we'll have a direct connection to the internet, and it'll be a hard stream. We're in a strange place meteorologically. And if you look at where we are in terms of a country, in terms of an empire, it kind of feels like the end of Rome. I think we can make some apt comparisons to that time, and particularly with the Neros of that time. So there's a lot going on out there. It's not just the weather. And we're going to talk about it today. We're going to get into it. I would say that, oh, by the way, thank you for waiting this morning. I apologize for being a little on the late side. It happens every now and then. for some reason, this town, like when I was living in Austin, man, I'd be up at like 5:30, easy, bang, shot out of a cannon, ready to rock and roll, ready to go. In this town, however, they must have a sleep ray that they broadcast from some undisclosed location, the sleep beacon, hidden somewhere in the Texas hills. My God. A sleepy little town it is, in more ways than one. Well, if you're paying attention to the news, your ears should be pricked up, because the con game is on. The con is on. The propaganda machine is in full swing. You know, last night I was at this place that I go to now here. It's kind of replaced Jack Allen's. Nothing can replace Jack Allen's. It's called the Navajo Grill. It's not a bad place. Monday night, decent. Get some wings, half off drinks at the bar. So last night there was this guy there, he's a local, and he seemed like an okay guy. And of course we started to talk about politics, and invariably goes to politics, right? Stream trickles off into, because what happens is people will start talking about Trump. And then once you talk about Trump, you're not talking about the TV show, you're not talking about Melania, you're not talking about his son, you're talking about politics. That's where it invariably goes. So I was talking about Netanyahu selling this war now, which is what he's doing. He's selling a war with Iran. And I was talking about that, and the guy that's sitting next to me was like, great, we should have taken him out years ago. And I'm like, okay, don't you understand like what's going on here? You know, don't you understand this whole idea of greater Israel and flipping these countries so that there can be this expansion in the Middle East? And then he brought up Gaddafi. And then he said, yeah, we should have taken him out years ago too. It's like, oh really? Well, have you seen what's happened to Libya since Gaddafi was gone? Have you seen what's happened to Western Europe? Aren't these people able to connect these things? I mean, the thinking sometimes is so simplistic that it boggles my mind. Absolutely boggles my mind. I mean, just because some guy is removed that was, put up to be a boogeyman. And by the way, if you look at Gaddafi and Libya, there are like two Gaddafis. And maybe there were two Gaddafis. When Reagan was president of the United States, they went in and they missile strafed Libya. They just, every now and then presidents will just do this. Declaration of war, forget it. And now, since we have 9/11 and we have the Patriot Act, there are clauses inside the Patriot Act where the president does not have to get a formal approval from Congress. People don't understand this. They were tossing this about, right after there was that dog and pony show that took place in Syria. They tossed it out. Oh, he's got to get a formal declaration for war. No, he doesn't. Those days are done, over. The Patriot Act abrogates the Constitution. The Patriot Act sits on top of the Constitution and nullifies most of it. They can do anything, as long as it's preemptive, as long as they can say and make a case that this is in the best interest of the United States and the security of the United States. They can go preemptive anytime they want. Anytime they want, which is basically what Israel does. They get preemptive anytime they want. By the way, I'm drinking coffee this morning. I didn't yesterday, and it worked out okay, I have to say. But today, it's a little gray out there. I got to knock the cobwebs out of my head. So, but it is a good coffee. It's my special blend. And it's fueled with a number of different interesting items. I took bulletproof coffee to another level. Let's just put it that way. I like playing chemist. I've been buying some bulk powders and putting them in my smoothie with the sole purpose of raising my testosterone level and lowering my estrogen level. Hey man, I'm 57 years old. What can I say? So I've been playing with some interesting powders. We'll get back to the Israel thing in a second. So the latest powders I brought in are Schizandra. It's that Chinese herb. It's really like scarlet red. And then I brought in some nettle powder to go along with some of the other stuff that I've been adding to my completely noxious smoothies. These things taste like garbage, but they're good. They're good for working out and basically keeping your male tonic alive. It's a good thing. It just tastes horrible. Anyway, the new powders have not added to the they've not added their high quality taste to the experience. Anyway, I love doing stuff like that. I love playing chemist in my kitchen, coming up with new formulas of things. So they can do it anytime they want. They can sell this war. Well, they're selling the war right now. Let's get into this. Let's bring up some prima facie evidence. This is from RT, and this is Netanyahu shows slides, shells to docs claiming Iran has nuclear weapons. So this is where they're going with this now. There's an agreement in place. And basically the agreement was that Obama was going to pay Iran, which he did, a pretty significant sum of money so that Iran would not develop nuclear weapons. Well, first of all, who gives a shit if Iran develops nuclear weapons? If I was a country, I'd have nuclear weapons. That'd be the first thing on my list. How do we get nuclear weapons? How do we build these things? Now, of course, there are those out there in the truth and the red pill community who believe that nuclear weapons don't exist. That's another scam, another fake, another falsity, another piece of fake news that we've been taught actually exists but doesn't. Draw your conclusions over that. But let's say they do exist. If they did, I would want to have my own nuclear weapons. Because that's the one thing that's kind of a deterrent to other countries and this wonderful, wonderful, wonderful march towards democracy that the United States seems to be intent on initiating the rest of the world into, often with disastrous results. Absolutely disastrous results. And we know the story. Look at it. Look at Iraq. How did that work out for us? Terrible. Absolutely terrible. Worst strategy ever. But a lot of times you would think, you would think that, well, here we go. We're going to go in. We're going to take this country over under false pretenses, which is what we did. But that war was completely sold by people like Netanyahu. Netanyahu was selling that war. Absolutely. He said if Saddam Hussein was gone, that there would be stability in the region. That was his 2 cents. That's what he was promoting. And then, of course, we had the complete dog and pony show at the UN with Colin Powell. Oh, God. With rods and yellow cake from Niger. Right. Then you had Don Rumsfeld talking about weapons of mass destruction. Do you remember his description? Well, they're north of Tikrit. I mean, he was like all over the map, all over the map. And then George Bush had the audacity to joke about the weapons of mass destruction. He found them like under his bed. So one of those chummy press dinners. I mean, it's too bad that the internet wasn't as alive in 2002 at that time, 2003. I mean, even if it was, though, the people were so traumatized after 9/11. God, I remember walking around and people were just zombified. Totally zombified. I was on a bunch of people marched on a beach in Half Moon Bay with candles after 9/11. And I was there just to, watch the scene. It was solemn. You know what they were mourning? They weren't necessarily mourning the death of the people that died in the Twin Towers. And there were people that died. There were. Absolutely. I knew people who had relatives in those two buildings. Okay? Was not a false flag. Well, it was a false flag, but it wasn't a false flag that was a psyop that was resulting in no deaths. They weren't mourning the death or the loss of those people. They were mourning the death of America, because America died on 9/11/2001. We died, and we became a proxy of the neocon government and a takeover by the neocons. It's exactly what happened. And they had their way with American policy. Within days after 9/11, of course, they passed the Project for the New American Century, which they had cooked up at the Brookings Institute, the American Enterprise Institute. It was ready to go. It was the clear break strategy. And ever since then, they've been able to do whatever they want. And that was the day America died. So they were selling that war on false premise. Total false premise. And the people were so zombified and so traumatized and so whacked out and so like, this is the first time this has ever happened to us. We want blood. Yeah, let's get this guy. Even though he had absolutely nothing to do with it, and the fact that we actually put him there in the first place. He was our proxy. Word to the wise out there, if you are installed as the head of a government in a foreign country by the United States, you better watch your back. Now they've got this thing figured out where if they're going to install a leader, a new leader in a place like the Middle East, although they really tried in Egypt. They tried to install the Muslim Brotherhood as the de facto government after they took out their proxy, Mubarak. That didn't work. The Egyptian army stepped in and said, we'll take care of this. So now the United States has to deal with the Egyptian army. All right, let's get into this story here. This is your war salesman. Netanyahu's doing like an Amway tour for war. He's like an Amway salesman. Iran lied about its nuclear program, making the 2015 deal invalid, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said in a televised address from Tel Aviv, using big screen presentation slides and video. Netanyahu showed the public a massive bookcase filled with folders, claiming this represents the number of documents that Israel has on Iran's program. He went on through his presentation on human-sized long screens, showing slides and pictures of what he claimed was evidence of Tehran's violating the agreements with global powers. Though Iran claimed it never had a nuclear weapons program, 100,000 secret files prove it did, Netanyahu said. After the 2015 nuclear deal, Iran continued to preserve and expand its nuclear weapons knowledge for future use. After signing the nuclear deal in 2015, Iran intensified its efforts to hide its secret files, he said. In 2017, Iran moved its nuclear weapons to a highly secret location in Tehran, which is going to give them license to bomb Tehran, right? According to the PM, Tehran, the prime minister, Tehran had preserved and expanded its military nuclear know-how in a secret atomic archive after the 2015 deal was signed. He said that half a ton of documents from the archives were obtained by Israel in a great intelligence achievement. Netanyahu claimed that the files contain incriminating evidence that Iran has been working to develop a nuclear bomb as part of a program called Project Ahmad. Let's just think through this for a second, okay? Iran and Israel are neighbors. They're neighbors. If Iran unleashed a, air quotes, nuclear bomb on Israel, don't you think there would be fallout? And I'm not talking political fallout. Of course there'd be that. I mean, the whole thing, the fallout would impact the Iranians significantly. The whole thing is just ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, we're at a time where a first strike would be fatal. Now, let's just say that Iran decides that they're going to take their secret nuclear weapon and put Tel Aviv or Jerusalem in the crosshairs and just go after them. How long do you think Iran would last after that moment? First of all, Israel has a missile shield, Project Iron Dome. Now, some people say that's been deactivated. I don't know if that's true or not. But for the sake of argument, let's say it's not. So any attempt to do a first strike on Israel would be met with some serious counterforce and countermeasure. Do you think Israel's just going to sit there and allow somebody to bomb them? No. As soon as Iranian aircraft got over Israeli airspace, even before, they're watching that place 24/7. What do you think they do? Within probably 25 miles, 30 miles of Israeli airspace, the missiles would come out. Boom. And what about missiles firing from Iran into Israel? Same thing. Surface-to-air anti-missile missiles, which they've bought from the United States. Well, actually, I don't even think they bought them from the United States. Maybe they did. I don't know. Maybe. They've got plenty of money. We give them plenty of money every year. What do? They go back and buy stuff from us. They also influence a lot of congressmen with that money. A lot of the money gets recirculated and pumped back into AIPAC, which helps advance programs and agendas. So let's just play this out. Let's say that that happens. Do you think Israel's going to allow itself to be attacked? It's got the highest and most sophisticated military equipment in the world. It's the best that Federal Reserve notes from the United States can buy. But they like to play the victim. They let we're just a country trying to get our feet back on the ground. No, you're not. Not just any country. I wonder how Facebook's going to deal with this. The last time I talked about stuff like this, my post was blocked because it was fake news. Stop fake news, Bubba. But let's play that out. So, all right, let's just say, for instance, Iran's allowed to get one or two of these missiles or bombs through. Next thing you know, kaboom, kaplooey, Israel's hit with a nuclear weapon. How long do you think it would take for the United States to not counterstrike on Iran? And don't you think Iran knows that? See, this is what happens with nuclear weapons. It's called game theory. If everybody has nuclear weapons, then guess what? Nobody attacks each other. They just don't. Because if they do, they know that, they're going to get wiped out by the people they attack. I mean, it's one of these things that's been this kind of fail-safe system where there are checks and balances that are part of the process. Theoretically, that's what kept the Cold War from becoming a hot war. That they had nukes, we had nukes, and thus they canceled each other out. Frankly, I think every planet on the nation, if it's true and valid, should have nuclear weapons, although that's not going to happen in Western Europe now, thanks to the EU. But really, if everybody had nuclear weapons, it'd be like, okay, hey, I'll leave you alone. It's like having a gun. If you're walking around the streets and somebody thinks you might have a gun, do you think they're going to attack you? There's a lesser chance, believe me, that they're going to stroke their little pointed chin and go, let's go get this guy or this gal. Because guess what? They might be packing, in which case that might be a result that you're not necessarily fishing for. So therefore, okay, let's back off. Let's let them pass. See, this is what happens with weapons as a deterrent. And I know this sounds really unenlightened. I'm sorry if it does, but it's true. In a wonderful, enlightened world where all the nuclear weapons are gone and all the weapons are gone, and we're all just walking around hugging each other and high-fiving each other and, doing the Texas two-step with each other, that would be a wonderful day on the planet, let me tell you. But as long as there are psychopaths and as long as there are parasites and parasitic psychopaths, that's not going to happen. And the parasitic psychopaths will do everything in their power to disarm neighboring countries or populations so that they can have their way with them. Question mark, why? Because parasitic psychopaths are bullies. They're bullies. And bullies only attack people that they think are vulnerable. You think a bully sizes up somebody who's about, let's say you're on a playground and you're a kid. By the way, this doesn't happen much anymore. Kids don't fight anymore. They really don't. I've been on playgrounds. They just when I was a kid, man, fights. You'd have maybe about a fight a week when I was growing up, whether it was on elementary school or middle school. And I was actually in a lot of them. A lot fewer in middle school. Elementary school, I got into a lot of fights. Anyway. Some were good and some were not so good. That's the nature of it. I think I had about a 500 record. But bullies go after people that are vulnerable. They don't go after the big bruiser. You know why? Because the bully has sized it up and said, no. Get my ass kicked there. Yeah, how about this? How about this guy? I'll go after this guy. What a pussy. What a wimp. I got this. Every now and then, the pussy and the wimp will turn the tide and will kick the bully's ass. And that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a planet that has countries, and this country is included in the mix. I'm sorry. We become a global bully. I hate to say it, but it's true. And it's been going on for quite a while, and it's unfortunate. Today's May Day, and May Day back in the old days is when the Soviet Union would have these giant parades, and they'd bring out their latest and greatest weapons, all these giant missiles. And who knows if they worked or not. We don't know, but they sure looked good on those trailers, didn't they? By the way, the Soviet Union has no arms unless the United States steps in and helps them build these arms. Anthony Sutton talks about this in great detail. Again, I can't stress this enough. If you want a primer on how the world works at the elite level, you just go and buy Anthony Sutton's books Watch his videos on the internet. There are plenty of them. If you don't have time to read a book, which seems like not many people do these days. One of the things he talks about this Swerve missile that the Soviets created, which became a game changer in terms of missiles. And the reason why it became such a game changer, well, the reason why these missiles were so effective was that there was a specific type of bearing that was produced for the missiles' guidance systems. And that bearing was made in the United States. Only one company was able to produce this bearing, which fit like a hand in a glove inside of these guidance systems for the missiles. And so the Soviet Union did not have access to this specific bearing. Therefore, their missiles were like Stone Age catapults compared to the United States missiles and missile defense. So what did the United States do? Well, they decided we're going to give the Soviets these bearings. We're going to give them the bearings. And they did. And there was one company, I think they were located in Florida, if I'm not mistaken. And they sent, I could be wrong about the location. They sent like 40 of these kind of lathes, bearing machines, whatever they're using to make these bearings, right, to the Soviet Union. So that not only could they have a batch of the bearings, but they could actually make them themselves. And when that happened, now the Soviets had very sophisticated Swerve missiles, and the arms race was on. And who benefits from this? The military-industrial complex. That's who benefits. Military-industrial complex. Anyway, I'm kind of going off the... But we became a bully. We became a global bully. We had to, guess what? We had to create the threat. The Soviet Union was no threat for the longest time. And this deal that I'm talking about took place in the 1970s. So basically everything, and we gave them, of course, through the Rosenbergs, we gave them our nuclear material. We gave them basically the blueprint on how to build a bomb. We've enabled Russia every step of the way in order to become a military power, because we needed to have that in order to fuel our own production of weaponry at a high level. And we're doing it again today. We had to turn them into another boogeyman so that we could continue this relationship, this addictive relationship with the military-industrial complex and everything that entails from that. And there are extremely wealthy people that make large sums of money from companies like Raytheon or McDonnell Douglas. And those are just two of the, that float to the top that you can grab and say, okay, well, there are more. There are a lot more. If you look at a company like Oracle or Cisco, they're involved in the military-industrial complex as well, because it's their circuitry, right? It's their chips, it's their spine and the back end that is engaged in this interstitial relationship with the components and the computers and the guidance systems and all the stuff that fuels the new arsenal of weaponry. Drones. How do you think drones operate? Well, they're computerized. So now we have this really broad spectrum of industry and production. Production, you've got to produce. You got to, when you make a missile, what are you doing? They're on a line, just like, Detroit has an assembly line. They're on a line. Then we also have, the cybernetic infrastructure. And so more and more industries have been brought into the military-industrial complex where there's huge profits. Why? Just look at the last bill that Trump signed. How much money was going into the military? Huge sums. These companies are profiting tremendously. And their shareholders, especially the ones at the top, the ones who have huge stakes in the company, making money right and left. And then what do they do after that? Well, they use their money to gain more influence. That's the nature of the game. You get money, money begets power, power begets influence, influence begets more power. Let's keep going here. Netanyahu has spoken to Russian President Vladimir Putin. They're buddies, by the way. Putin and Netanyahu are buddies. Keep that in mind. About the intelligence discoveries and intends to send experts to France and Germany in the coming days to share findings. Meaning they're going to sell the war. They're going to sell what they're going to do. Israel's long opposed the 2015 agreement, which saw international sanctions on its main geopolitical rival lifted in exchange for Iran curbing its controversial nuclear program. So what happened is that Iran agreed not to make weapons, a large sum of money from the U.S., and some of those sanctions were lifted so that they could have a more robust economy. Iranian media have dismissed Netanyahu's presentation, with the news agency Fars calling it a propaganda show, and the state news agency IRNA describing the Israeli PM as famous for ridiculous displays. Iranian Foreign Ministry Javad Zarif called Netanyahu's presentation a coordinated timing of alleged intelligence revelations by the boy who cries wolf. Just before May 12th, when U.S. President Donald Trump is expected to pull out of the nuclear deal. You can bet your ass he is. Which means once he pulls out, then the sanctions go back into Iran and it becomes more unstable again. Zarif said Netanyahu was undeterred by the cartoon fiasco at the UN General Assembly, referring to the 2012 presentation that used the cartoon bomb graphic. Yeah, it was pretty laughable. After his meeting with the U.S. Secretary of State, here's a big name, remember it, Mike Pompeo, on Sunday, Netanyahu said the attempt of Iran to acquire nuclear weapons, remains the greatest threat to Israel, the U.S., and the whole world. Give me a break. Give me a break. I mean, I just laid it out. Anybody with half a brain can figure this out. If Iran goes into first strike mode, first of all, they will threaten themselves. They'll threaten themselves. Look at the proximity of the country. Look at the potential fallout of anything nuclear coming in their direction. And their people would suffer. What are they going to do? Go climb into underground bunkers for what, a year, so that they can kind of outlast the fallout? I don't think so. I don't think that the Iranians would do that. This is my humble opinion. That even if they did do a first strike again, think about the counterstrike. The counterstrike would decimate. And again, let's be clear, Israel has a massive anti-deterrent system called Iron Dome. Now, Preston James says it's been deactivated. I don't know. I can't speak to that. But again, are they unable to defend themselves? No. They can defend themselves. The whole thing is insanity. But I sat at this place in Navajo Grill last night, and you wonder why these things exist. Because that guy sitting next to me, nice guy, smart guy, although I kicked his ass in trivia, maybe he wasn't so smart. He was just, banging the drum for the party line. And I said, great, well, you'll get your wish. And guess what will happen? We'll send American men and women over there, because you can't have a war. See, these people just think that, you push a few buttons and you decimate a country, and all of a sudden it's nice and clean and tidy, and you wipe out the threat, you exterminate the threat. Great. Let me just click from that footage, and let me watch the NBA playoffs, and people don't understand these things have consequences. In order to secure a territory, you got to get on the ground. You have to unless you wipe out everything. And trust me, they don't want to wipe out everything in Iran. That place has got resources. And the reason why you want to flip a country or expand your territory, you want the resources. You don't want to wipe out all their drilling equipment, the refining equipment. Or maybe you do, I don't know, because rebuilding these countries seems to be big business as well. But there are other resources there too. You know, Iran is actually a pretty fertile place. It grows food, which I'm sure the Israelis would love because, again, this is part of the Annan plan. This is the proliferation of greater Israel. This is what they want. They want to rule the region with proxy governments like Jordan and Saudi Arabia, who is clearly a proxy of Israel. It has been for a very long time. Trace back the House of Saud and you'll find out where they come from. Okay, this is true. But why would you want to decimate an entire area that you want to take over? You want to rule. And by the way, do you think that Iranians are going to lay down and just, bow down and say, "Oh, yes, 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 please take our country over"? Remember that failed coup they had earlier in the year, like late last year? It was a total failed coup. It's like everyone's like, "Oh yeah, look what's happening. Man, democracy's spreading. People have had enough." And they shut that shit down, didn't they? Try ruling an entire country of people. They tried it with Iraq, and guess what happened? Well, it's chaos. But that's okay. They like chaos. They love chaos because chaos is manageable. You have people fighting against each other. They love chaos. Chaos is the most manageable situation that they can think of. What they don't want is they don't want order. Unless it's their ironclad order. And unless you're Saudi Arabia, where you're throwing people off the top of buildings, or you've got the guillotines out and slicing their heads off, that order is very, very difficult to impose. So it's management by chaos, because nobody knows really who's in charge, and everybody's kind of fighting against each other. You got the story. I don't have to. They love that stuff. But in order for them to really flip this country, they're going to need boots on the ground. And who do you think those boots are going to be? Our men, our women. Good luck with that. So I told this guy, I said, "Oh, great, you'll get your war. And you'll have men and women from this country going over there, getting killed. And even worse, I think getting killed probably is maybe the lesser of being maimed. Because if you're maimed, you got to stay in your body, then deal with being maimed. There's this commercial on TV now where they show this guy who's, flashing back and going over to the Middle East. I'm assuming it's Iraq, and he's with his buddies, and he looks good and he looks strong. And then all of a sudden, boom, catastrophe, right? And then they show him coming back to the United States. He's got, a couple of limbs missing, or, it's not a pretty picture. And his neurological system's all messed up, and they show him rehabbing, and oh boy, isn't that a great story? Doesn't it just make your heart melt? No, quite frankly, it doesn't make my heart melt. In fact, that makes me sick to my stomach, because that guy should never have had to deal with those injuries. Period. End of story. Done. We lionize these people, and it's unfortunate that we do. It's better than what happened in Vietnam, okay? These poor bastards from Vietnam. Just ask my friend Perry Eulander what that was like. Come home, and man, are they ostracized. But now these guys, but here's the difference. Big cognitive dissonance. They come home, they're completely messed up. Even if they're not messed up in terms, their bodies haven't been, permanently damaged, then their psyche certainly is. I mean, people can be walking around and be fine. They can walk, run, eat, bring a beer mug to their face, but between their ears, that's a whole different story. But then you get the VA system, and Trump seems to love our vets. Oh, I love our vets. If you love our vets so much, keep them the fuck out of the war, okay? if you love our fighting men and women so much, why don't you just throw down with your promise that got you elected? And enough of this 4D chess bullshit, okay? I'm just calling it out. Sorry, I know there are a lot of QAnon lovers that listen to this show. Interesting things happening with QAnon. There's some awakening happening. I'll check that box. But I was reading something. So Israel went in and hit Syria over the last couple of days, okay? And they said that what they did is that they were hitting Iranian forces inside of Syria. Well, so what? So what? What if Syria and Iran have a deal? That Iran is going to protect Syria from the imperialist proxy armies so that Syria can actually defend itself. Show me where that's not a part of some charter. Are they not allowed to do that? Maybe Netanyahu can get up and do another Amway speech. Try to sell the thing. So if you read the QAnon stuff, and correct me, because there are QAnon people that listen, please send me an email or a text, and if I'm wrong, I'll be happy to admit I'm wrong. But I read that the reason why the strikes were happening was because the cabal, there's that name, the cabal. The cabal was hiding nuclear weapons in parts of Syria. Oh, really? Really? So now we're supposed to take this disembodied voice with the, cute little code and all that stuff that goes along with the whole cult of QAnon. I'm sorry. You go, oh yeah, okay. Good, right? We struck. I mean, this is right straight out of 1984. Straight out of 1984. QAnon is the silent narrative for a new version of 1984, and people are supposed to believe it. Okay, I'm sorry. When I saw that, it's like, oh, this is not a good thing. And I think you're just supposed to take it on face value. And then of course, there's the always Trump. Always Trump, believe in Trump, trust. It's all been connected and linked to QAnon. And it's setting up an enormous, I'm talking about an enormous field of cognitive dissonance. I'm still waiting for the indictments and the arrests and people to check out, see you later. But we'll never know. Oh, you'll never know. It'll be a secret military tribunal, and they'll just go off to this, new and improved, well, maybe not improved, but expanded version of Guantanamo. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's happening. Just trust in the process. Okay. Meanwhile, here's a few truth bombs. Oh, did you know that Hillary Clinton was involved in the death of JFK Jr.? Of course. And some people are like, oh my God. Oh my God, it's true. Connect the dots. Whoever is behind QAnon, I'm sorry, they must be laughing their ass off. I mean, laughing their ass. And look, there are going to be people out there who listen to this, and they're going to defend QAnon because they've signed off on it. And when you sign off on something, when you buy in, brain, gut, and heart, body, mind, spirit, whether it's a president or whether it's a digital avatar, whatever it is, and they prove to be less than or not what they're supposed to be, people get very defensive because they've bought in at such a deep level that by unplugging from it or denouncing it, then they're essentially disassembling everything they thought was true. And here's where it gets real tricky, because the entirety of who you are, for the most part, has been attached to this thing. Absolutely. It's been attached to it. It has become a personification of your beliefs. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? To some extent. To some extent, it's not a bad thing, because it allows you to buy in and begin to assimilate information very quickly. There's more rapid. The assimilation is more rapid when you buy into something than when you're filtering it. So you can get things really quickly. Okay, buy into this, I buy into this, I buy into this, and boom, there you go. What do you think happened inside of the behind the closed doors of the NXIVM cult? People bought in. They bought in, and when they bought in, all of a sudden, Keith Raniere became a freaking messiah. Oh my God, this is great! This is great! This is great! Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And then revelation and epiphany happens at a much more rapid rate. But if you don't buy in, if you're filtering, it slows the process down. So therefore, what do we have? We have less of an acceleration. And what do people want in their lives? But for the most part, they want acceleration and momentum. That's what people want. They want to break the spell of entropy, which is what we're in for the most part. And by doing that, getting acceleration momentum, you're breaking the spell of entropy, and you feel like you're alive. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But you got to really understand, who's talking to you and vetting these things. So listen, if you are a person that is following QAnon and you're at the Church of QAnon, and you're waking up, God bless you. Continue to do it. But man, please use some discernment. Just don't take the QAnon message as gospel. Please don't. Pull some things out of it that are interesting. But try to check what's going on, really. I mean, it is the perfect cryptographic digital fairy tale of our time. Use your discernment. Pull things out of there. And if you are listening to me and you're having your doubts about QAnon, don't feel bad. Don't feel like you've been, ripped off. We've all had that feeling. We've all bought into something and you feel ripped off. I remember when I was back and Ron Paul was running for president. The first time he was running for, I was so into Ron Paul. It's like, this guy's addressing everything that I think is really important, especially the war stuff. Let's audit the Fed. It was like, okay, the libertarians make the most sense. Ron Paul's running as a Republican. Okay, that's fine. And then I saw what happened with the Paul campaign. And it was really early on. They had voter fraud. It was like right in New Hampshire. And they had fraud going on in New Hampshire. And the fraud continued to take place all the way through the primaries. And I was like, Ron Paul, you have so much money. You've done these money bombs. You've had so much money. How come you're not challenging the voter count? Even Dennis Kucinich was talking about it. And we paid you this money. Do something with it. Oh, well, we're on to the next one. We're on to that. And then finally it was just like. And after that was like the one time the Trump thing was interesting for me. Not because of Trump was Trump. Although I held out a slight scintilla that Trump could be a little bit different. But what I loved about the whole Trump campaign was that it was breaking down the wall of politically correct think. That was the part about Trump that I absolutely loved. And I love the fact that a Clinton or a Bush was not going to get into the White House. Well, clearly a Bush is now in the White House. Let's talk a little bit about Mike Pompeo. This is from Sputnik News. Mike Pompeo, Jordan's king, agree on urgent need to confront Iran and Syria. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has traveled to Jordan to discuss with the kingdom's authorities the situation around Syria, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and the Iran nuclear deal. This is not a good thing. Mike Pompeo is a millennialist. He's not a millennial, he's a millennialist. Whether or not he actually believes this stuff, but apparently he's one of these hardcore end times Zionist Christians, just like Mike Pence, who believe in sort of this dominionist theory. If you watch The Handmaid's Tale, more than likely these are the dominionists moved into the future. It's like they've got their own version of being the chosen ones. It's like, okay, we're going to have, we're going to run the world. We're going to have the pick of the litter. We'll get to be, God's electorate on earth. So the reason why he's going to Jordan is that they actually want to replace Assad with this king from Jordan, King Abdullah. That's been the plan for a long time. So let me just read this here. The U.S. State Department said that Mike Pompeo, Jordan's king, agreed on urgent need to confront Iran's destabilizing activities in Syria. This is the new narrative. Iran's destabilized. So they've turned, okay, now all of a sudden they care about Syria. We care about Syria. But Iran is there. They're destabilizing this. ISIS is no longer there. Iran's the new boogeyman. Man, they can change their narrative in a heartbeat. These people are the masters of deception. Pompeo and King Abdullah also discussed other regional issues such as defeating the Islamic State terrorist group, abandoned Russia, and facilitating the peace deal between Israel and Palestine. Peace deal. All right. They also discussed working to support bilateral ties between the United States and Jordan. She added Pompeo made 3 stops in the Middle East this weekend, discussed critical regional and bilateral issues with officials in Saudi Arabia, Israel, and Oman. Those are going to be the 3 allies. Saudi Arabia is an ally of the United States. We just sold them, as the millennials like to say, a shit ton of weapons. And if they have a shit ton of weapons, they're going to use those weapons. Why? Because we can sell them a shit ton more. Pompeo reiterated that the U.S. goal is to defeat the Daesh terror group. No, it's not. We must not let Syria again become a safe haven for the Islamic State or for any other terrorist group, he said. Oh, right. Yeah. So you're going to get in there under the pretext that there are terror groups, aka Iran, happening within the border and the boundaries of Syria, and you're going to bomb the shit out of Syria. Pompeo also noted that another U.S. goal is to ensure safe and timely delivery of humanitarian aid and to de-escalate the violence. Oh, yeah, right. The Secretary of State said he discussed with Gaddafi the issue of deterring the use of chemical weapons. I thought we gave the chemical weapons away. Didn't we do that? Or not we, but didn't Syria do that? Under John Kerry? Didn't that exchange take place? Didn't that kind of torpedo the Obama regime's plan around Syria? The United States is fully committed to the ceasefire arrangement in southwest Syria, Pompeo added. Sure. Safadi hailed the creation of the de-escalation zone in the south of Syria, an example of cooperation between the United States, Jordan, and Russia. Right. The de-escalation zone is going to be a land grab. That's what it is. Oh, we're going to turn this into a de-escalation zone. Yeah, we're going to put troops here just to make sure that it's all de-escalated. And we're going to build a few bases here just to make sure that the de-escalation really lasts for a while. No, we're going to build a new little city around these bases because, of course, we're going to need some infrastructure around these bases inside the de-escalation zone. And you know what? Just to make sure that the de-escalation zone continues to be safe, let's build a wall around the perimeter so nobody gets inside of Syria and southwest Syria so that the de-escalation zone can continue to be a de-escalation zone. Oh, there we go. It's completely de-escalated. Now we've got a wall. Now we've got bases. And now we've got civilian infrastructure. Mission accomplished. We've just grabbed a bunch of land and territory. And don't you feel safer? You people of Syria, don't you feel much safer now? Let's see what kind of shell game they've got going on with Palestine. Speaking of the conflict, Pompeo underscored ongoing U.S. support for a two-state solution. We're certainly open to a two-party solution that is a likely outcome, he said. No, it's not. It is not a likely outcome. Why is it not a likely outcome? It's because Israel has to be intact for the end times. Their little fairy tale. Israel has to be intact. There cannot be two Israels. It has to be one. So, Mr. Pompeo is probably crossing his fingers behind his back while he's talking about this. At the same time, the United States is calling on Israelis and Palestinians to restart political dialogue aimed at achieving peace in the Middle East. Oh, really? Political dialogue. How's that gone? Maybe they can bring Jared in to be the mediator, the great peacemaker. Have you ever listened to Jared Kushner talk? He sort of talks like this. He has a very effeminate voice, Jared Kushner does. It's a voice that carries lots of clout and extreme power behind it. This is a kid who, when Netanyahu came and stayed at his parents' place, Netanyahu slept in Jared Kushner's bed, and Jared Kushner had to sleep on the couch when Netanyahu came over. True story. Palestine seeks the establishment of a state on the territories of the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, which is partially occupied by Israel and the Gaza Strip. The Israeli government has refused to recognize Palestine as an independent political and diplomatic entity. It continues to build settlements in occupied areas, despite objections from the United Nations. Well, the United Nations can be very effective when it wants to be, and very ineffective when it needs to be. Peace efforts began in the 1970s, culminating in the 2003 Roadmap for Peace proposed by the Middle East Quartet, the United States, the United Nations, the European Union, and Russia. Since then, the two-state solution has been the main objective for mediators. Since the 1970s. So you want to solve, if you want to solve that crisis, here's what you do. Here's what I would do. You make it an even playing field. How much money does Israel get from the United States on a yearly basis? A lot. How much money does Palestine get or Gaza get? Not so much. And in fact, they're getting less now, thanks to Mr. MAGA. So what I do is I bring those two sums closer to balance, into balance, so that the Palestinians are getting a lot more and the Israelis are getting considerably less. And now we've got kind of an economic playing field that's a lot more equal. And then allow the Palestinians to build out their infrastructure. Maybe if the Palestinians in Gaza had great infrastructure, that they might just be okay with where things are. But unfortunately, that's not going to happen because the people on the other side of that wall, which they've built, don't want it. They don't want any competition in that area. They want no competition. Do you think corporations want competition? No. They want to smash everybody. They say, well, competition is good for business. No, it's not. Competition is terrible for business. If you're running a business, you don't want any competitors. You want to be a dominant force. It may be okay for a while. We'll improve our product line. This will help us become more efficient because we're going toe to toe with these two other companies. For a while, it's okay. And after a while, it's like, let's just take them out. Either buy them out, freeze them out, throw a bunch of, people on strike and, disable them because we want to be the only game in town. Do you think Starbucks wants competition from little mom and pop coffee shops? No, they don't. The Starbucks model has always been put your coffee shop in a couple blocks away from the mom and pop. They're aggressive. They're totally aggressive. You can't have Starbucks inside the city limits of this town, though. That's the truth. If you are a franchise or you're a box lot, you got to set up shop outside of town. And that way we keep the pristine little vision of Fredericksburg intact. It's a wonderland. It's a little German wonderland. And you can come here and have a German breakfast with German pancakes. And perhaps you might even be able to have some Liebfraumilch with your schnitzel later in the day. No, look, I'm not bagging on the place. But that's what they're doing. They're creating like a little, alpine getaway. If you can't go to Germany, come to Fredericksburg and taste the wine while you're at it. Let's just check into the old chat room here, see what's going on. Acknowledge some people. Let's see. Maury, happy morning. Judy, I wonder every morning how you can do this so early. You know what, Judy? I just strap it on every day. Maury, what is going on? Many things, many agendas. All depends on which level you are, which the response will come from. Small towns contribute to the circadian rhythms. Apparently so. Cheryl Jensen, GLP, was Wild and Wolf in 2002. Totally, man. Godlike Productions, off the charts. Wild and Woolly. Susan, good morning. What else? Watched a few of Anthony Sutton's videos. Amazing. Absolutely. The entirety of who you are, key phrase. That needs to be spoken of more frequently. The folks at the local pub, no matter how seemingly intelligent, define themselves as the person they see in the mirror each morning. Very small view of who they are. Absolutely. Millennialist at its root is a nihilist. Yes. Sioux News, like a high security prison. Sounds like a high security. Yeah, absolutely. That's where Syria is headed. High security prison. Just keep building the four walls up. Shall we do a little time tunnel today? Well, today is May 1st, also known as May Day, International People's Day. Yeah, power to the people. Speaking of power to the people, I like to troll David Hogg's Twitter feed. I did a response to somebody who was like lauding David Hogg's understanding of the scope of history. And I said, understanding the scope of history, he's grasping at the Cliff Notes. I got close to 110 likes on that one comment. That's the most likes I've ever gotten on any comment on Twitter. By the way, keep your eye on David Hogg and their little movement. They're beginning to make a pivot. I can see where they're going. Their little movement is now slowly trending towards anti-war. Watch what's happening with the Hoggies. You've heard of the Droogies? Those are the Hoggies. All right, let's go back in time here. Well, first of all, did you know that today is the 121st day of the year? And there are 244 days remaining until the end of the year. Okay, back in 524, King Sigismund of Burgundy is executed at Orleans after an 8-year reign and is succeeded by his brother Godemar. How'd you like to be the brother that executes your brother? Oh, man. Oh, boy. I mean, this Abel Cain stuff, man, just rolled forward, right? Just rolled forward. You know, it was the psychopath who survived. Let's see. What else do we have here? And back in 1169, Norman mercenaries land at Bannow Bay in Leinster, marking the beginning of the Norman invasion of Ireland. 1328, Wars of Scottish Independence end. By the Treaty of Edinburgh, Northampton, the Kingdom of England recognizes the Kingdom of Scotland as an independent state. How about that? In 1707, that changes. On the very same day, the Act of Union joins the Kingdom of England and the Kingdom of Scotland to form the Kingdom of Great Britain. So 1328, Scotland's got its own independent fiefdom. 1707, not anymore, same day. In 1753, Species Plantarum by Linnaeus is published and is the formal start date of plant taxonomy, adopted by the International Code of Botanical Nomenclature. So on this day, the science of plant taxonomy was born. How about that? Oh, here we go. 1776. Establishment of the Illuminati in Ingolstadt by Jesuit taught Adam Weishaupt. Adam Weishaupt. So on May Day, how about that? Illuminati Kickstarter. And some people say that the Illuminati doesn't exist. Well, according to Wikipedia, it does. And if Wikipedia says it's true, it must be true. 2 years later, the American Revolution, the Battle of Crooked Billet begins in Hatboro, Pennsylvania. 1785, this is in Hawaii, Kamehameha I defeats Kalanakikapuli, establishes the Kingdom of Hawaii. 1786, in Vienna, Austria, Mozart's opera, The Marriage of Figaro, is performed for the first time. Mozart was a Freemason. Most people know that. Let's see. What else do we have? Lots of wars, man. So many wars. We might actually live on Mars. 1794. War of the Pyrenees, the Battle of Boulou ends, in which French forces defeat the Spanish and regain nearly all the land they lost to the Spanish in 1793. How about that? 1846, the few remaining Mormons left in Nauvoo, Illinois, formally dedicate the Nauvoo Temple. 1851, Queen Victoria opens the Great Exhibition at the Crystal Palace in London. 1862, American Civil War, the Union Army completes its capture of New Orleans. Devastating loss for the South. New Orleans being a port city, devastating. 1865, the Empire of Brazil, Argentina and Uruguay, empires of Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay, signed the Treaty of the Triple Alliance. Back in 1866, the Memphis race riots began. In 3 days' time, 46 blacks and 2 whites were killed. Reports of the atrocities influenced passage of the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution. There you go. Back in 1866. Why is it International People's Day? Well, there are a number of reasons. But in 1884, the proclamation of demand for the 8-hour workday in the United States begins. Also, on the same day in the same year, Moses Fleetwood Walker becomes the first black person to play a professional baseball game in the United States. 1885, of course, under the sign of Taurus, the original Chicago Board of Trade building opens for business. 1 year later, rallies are held throughout the United States demanding the 8-hour workday because the proclamation occurred in 1884, culminating in the Haymarket Affair in Chicago, in commemoration of which May 1st is celebrated as International Workers' Day in many countries. There you go. 1893, the World's Columbian Exposition opens in Chicago. Again, Chicago. Let's see, what else do we have here? We had a big mine disaster in 1900. That was the Schofield mine in Schofield, Utah. Killed over 200 men. The 5th worst mining accident in United States history. 15 years later, the Lusitania departs from New York City on her 202nd, 22, final crossing of the North Atlantic. 6 days later, the ship is torpedoed off the coast of Ireland, the loss of 1,198 lives. And of course, it is that event which catapults us into World War I. Loose lips sink ships. 1919, German troops enter Munich to squash the Bavarian Social Soviet Republic. In 1925, All China Federation of Trade Unions is officially founded. Today, it is the largest trade union in the world, with 134 million members. You never see them go on strike. 1927, the Union Labor Life Insurance Company is founded by the American Federation of Labor. Lots of labor and union activity on May 1st. And on this day in 1830, the dwarf planet Pluto is officially named. How about that? The Empire State Building, dedicated on this day in 1931. It's a big day, man. May 1st is a really, really big day. Isn't it funny that Pluto is named under the sign of Taurus? Its opposite sign. Interesting. I think it's interesting. 1945, Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels and his wife Magda commit suicide in the Reich Garden outside the Fuhrer bunker. Their children were also killed by having cyanide pills inserted into their mouths by their mother Magda. Well, a lot of those guys took off and got to South America. I'm not sure if Goebbels was one of them. Mengele was. Let's see, what else we have here. 1946, the Paris Peace Conference concludes that the islands of Dodecanese should be returned to Greece by Italy. Okay, what else do we have? The Democratic People's Republic of Korea, North Korea, is established with Kim Il-sung as the leader. Isn't that interesting? So here we have on May Day, 1948, North Korea being established. And May Day, 2018, 70 years later, they're looking at reunification. I wonder if today's a big day in the reunification plan. Let's see, 1950, Guam is organized as a United States Commonwealth. 1956, the polio vaccine, developed by Jonas Salk, Freudian slip, is made available to the public. Happy Vaccine Day! Let's see. 1956, a doctor in Japan reports an epidemic of an unknown disease of the central nervous system, marking the official discovery of Minamata disease. So much going on here. 1960, Cold War. Francis Gary Powers and a Lockheed U-2 spy plane is shot down over Sverdlovsk Oblast, Soviet Union, sparking a diplomatic crisis. In 1961, the Prime Minister of Cuba, Fidel Castro, proclaims Cuba a socialist nation and abolishes elections. Today is a really good day for tyranny, isn't it? Today's a good day for tyranny. If you've got any tyrannical plans that you've been sitting on, today's a good day to hatch them. I'm telling you, the forces of history are with you. Don't hesitate. Let's see. What else do we have? Today was the day that Elvis and Priscilla Beaulieu were married in Las Vegas. How about that? What was she, 17? 16, 17? Elvis is robbing the cradle. Was a fine-looking woman, Priscilla Presley. Here we go, 1971. Amtrak, the National Railroad Passenger Corporation, takes over operation of U.S. passenger rail service. Think about that. Amtrak has a total monopoly on rail service in this country. Isn't that kind of a tyrannical move? Do you think Amtrak wants competition? Hells to the no. This is a good day for Sydney. The Sydney Entertainment Centre is open. Isn't that where the Opera House is? Love that Opera House. Absolutely love it. A year before that, in 1982, Operation Black Buck. Doesn't that sound a little racist now these days? Black Buck. The Royal Air Force attacks the Argentine Air Force during the Falklands War. In 1987, Pope John Paul II beatifies Edith Stein, a Jewish-born Carmelite nun who was gassed in the Nazi concentration camp at Auschwitz. St. Edith. Today's St. Edith Day. 1989, Disney MGM Studios opens at Walt Disney World near Orlando, Florida. How about that? Now, this is a heavy day. This is when Ayrton Senna died back in 1994. Three-time Formula One world champion Ayrton Senna killed in an accident whilst leading the San Marino Grand Prix at Imola. That was the last death at a Formula One event with Ayrton Senna. If you have followed my blog for any amount of time, you know I'm a huge Ayrton Senna fan. Interesting character. Aries. He was an Aries. Guess how he died? Part of the steering column dislodged itself, flew through the car, and went directly into his forehead. Had that piece of the steering column been a half an inch higher, it would have hit his helmet and bounced off his helmet. But instead, it actually ducked in just under the visor and penetrated the skull just above the brow ridge, thus killing Ayrton Senna. Remember, he was an Aries, and he clearly died an Aries death. Ayrton Senna was a giant, absolute giant. 1995, 1 year later, the Croatian War of Independence. Croatian forces launch Operation Flash. A lot of operations taking place. Black Buck, Flash. The body of British climber George Mallory is found on Mount Everest 75 years after his disappearance in 1924. That was in 1999. On the very same day, an extremely important historical and cultural moment. SpongeBob SquarePants makes his premiere on Nickelodeon right after the 1999 Kids' Choice Awards. So SpongeBob SquarePants helped usher in the new millennium. It's actually a pretty funny show. I used to watch it with my kid. Very inappropriate. Let's see, what else do we have here? (2003) invasion of Iraq. In what becomes known as Mission Accomplished speech on board the USS Abraham Lincoln, U.S. President George W. Bush declares that major combat operations in Iraq have ended. What a crock of shit. Of course they didn't end. Let's see, what else here? 2004, Cyprus, Czech Republic, Estonia, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania, Malta, Poland, Slovakia, and Slovenia joined the European Union. Celebrated at the residence of the Irish president in Dublin. 2009, same-sex marriage. Legalized in Sweden. I have to say, it's been all downhill for Sweden ever since. Is it because of same-sex marriage? I don't know, but look at what's happened to Sweden. That country's a mess. An absolute mess. 2011, War on Terror, Al-Qaeda. Leader Osama bin Laden is shot and killed by U.S. Navy SEALs. Look at all these days. Look at all these events on May Day. If that's the case, then we are in for something historical today. What's going to happen today on this May Day? My God. Osama bin Laden shot. Cuba becomes socialist. The British attacked the Argentines in the Falkland War. Gary Powers is shot down over the Soviet Union. SpongeBob comes to life. How about that? There's a lot going on. A lot going on out there. All right, let's get back into the present. Let's wind this baby up. Maury just had a comment in the chat room. Hello, are we on? Are we on? Come on now. There we go. Maury just had a comment in the chat room that Fredericksburg reminds him of Disneyland. You know, why don't they have like a German theme park here? Hello, there's plenty of land. A German theme park. What would we call it? I don't know. Wiedersland, I don't know. I'm open to suggestions here. Schnitzelland. Alaman, USA. How about that? Alaman, I mean, that could be a really cool thing. I'm serious, though. They could have rides, but they could also have a lot of like really cool like German cultural stuff. Boy, would that raise some eyebrows. I could just see them. Oh, that's a racist. That's a racist theme park. I'm telling you, they can make a lot of money. Alamon, USA. I'll add that to my list of things for Fredericksburg. Okay, why don't we get on out of here? Man, I rambled today. I was going to say half-hour show. Today, I was on here for an hour and a half. Got a late start, but got it going. All right. Get on out there. If you have had some closet tyranny that you've been holding on to, today is to bring it out. Bring out the big guns today. Mayday. Tyrant Day. No, don't be a tyrant. Although, theoretically, tyrants might have more fun. For a while, at least. I mean, that Castro had a hell of a time. Had a heck of a time down in Cuba. Holy smokes. Are you kidding me? He had the best cigars, the best booze, as many women as he wanted. And he was a king. By the way, the story that that Castro apparently was such a baseball fan that he used to sneak into games at Yankee Stadium dressed as a rabbi so he could watch the Yankees, who were his favorite baseball team. And you think about it and you think, well, that's really far-fetched, right? Except Bono got into a bike wreck in Central Park, and I think he was dressed as a rabbi when he was riding that bike. Isn't that an odd little irony? Is today Bono's birthday? I wonder if I think Bono's. I know Bono's a Taurus. Let's see whose birthday it is today. Let's see if what do we got here? Yeah, no, he's a Taurus. Today's not his birthday. But he's a Taurus. Oh, Goebbels. See that death? Those are deaths, right? Those are deaths. Hold on. What do we got? No, today's not his birthday. I thought, that would have been really, really funny, right? Today was his birthday. Because he's a tyrant. Bono's a tyrant. He's a total tyrant. All right, let's get on out of here. Thanks for being a part of today's show, even though we got a little bit of a late start. And thank you for listening to it in all of its 90-minute entirety. See, this is what happens when you have coffee. Yesterday I didn't have any coffee. Tomorrow I probably won't have coffee. You know the drill. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to step when it's possible, and do your best to stay human. Because in the seed of your humanity is your divinity.
You're listening to 15 Minutes of Flame with Robert Phoenix.